What's up, guys? Today we're going to be taking photos of a 3-story home here in the Houston area, and I figured I'd bring you guys along and show you basically some basics in real estate photography and how to get started. So let's check out the place and then get set up and get going. So fun fact about this shoot, this is my first official shoot as a freelancer for real estate related stuff. So pretty cool. So we're basically just gonna be using one camera, one lens, and one accessory to get most of these photos. So now let's set it up. Camera, we're gonna be using a Canon 5D Mark IV. And for the lens, we're gonna be using a 16-35, specifically Canon 16-35 f4IS. And then the last two accessories actually is gonna be a polarizing filter because we have wood floors here, and I'll explain what that does, and a tripod. So a polarizer filter is kind of an essential for real estate photography because whenever you have wood floors, you get a whole bunch of reflections coming in from the windows, and this basically cuts them out, which is really, really helpful, making the floor look sleek and clean versus like really blown out highlights that are like bouncing off the floor. So that's what the polarizer does. Fun fact, this is my first ever tripod that I ever bought. When I started photography, this thing has been with me for like 5 years now. It has some missing parts and kinks and starting to wear and tear, but still works. Just thought that was a fun fact. And for real estate video, I use a DJI Ronin S, but I already made a video on that and we're focusing on photography today. But I'll link that video up here. Okay, so basically now we're set up ready to go. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up and take some photos. So here we have the living room. It's really nice. Also, this home, if you haven't noticed, is vacant, meaning there's no furniture in it. So basically we're just showing the space and how big the rooms are, what the features are. And so let me show you how I set up a shot for something like this. Okay, so I just got my camera set up right here in the corner. Basically, you can see this whole scene really nicely, basically from there to that corner. And to give you an idea, this is kind of where my camera is leveled at. Basically, I think chest level is always like a really good, really good spot to have your camera height-wise. You don't want it too high where all you see is ceiling, and you don't want it too low because then you're just gonna get a bunch of floor, especially on a wide angle lens. Right here, we're at 16 millimeters, so distortion can become pretty crazy. So make sure to find that sweet spot for the height. So this is basically the image that we see on here. Okay, so I basically just set up this scene. Now we're back to the kitchen area. Let me show you. So here we have the camera set up. This is the scene that we're looking at. Basically, I want to get a shot covering from there all the way over there, showing this big open area, how it shows the kitchen and breakfast dining or whatever. So now let me break down the settings. We are using ISO 100 to get the cleanest image, followed by the f-stop at 6.3 and my shutter depending on lighting, which is at 1/5 of a second right now. Another tip is to use your timer, your 2-second timer, so you don't get any motion blur when you press the shutter button, like this. That way, whenever you press the button, you're not gonna accidentally get some shake, which is possible because it's really slow shutters, even if you're on a tripod. Okay, so now we're back to the kitchen, and here I'm gonna give you tip number 3, and that is using this little feature right here, the in-camera leveler. Let me explain. Basically, you wanna avoid having any skewed photos. Basically, your camera looking up or looking down, especially because we're dealing with a lot of vertical lines. They look really distorted if your camera is not 100% level, which is known as keystoning. So basically, if you simply enable your grids and your in-camera leveler in your camera, you can avoid that completely to make sure that your shot is 100% level and accurate. It's just really pleasing and it looks really professional. So you can see here, mine is just perfectly leveled, and it says it's a little off on the up and down, but if I even do this, like just barely move it down, it's pretty much level, as good as it can get on this tripod. And the little bit that I need to correct, if any, can be done in editing really easily. So basically there's 2 types of shots that I do for real estate photography, and that's basically corners and head-on shots. So the one that I just did explaining, the leveler is a corner shot. Basically the camera is looking from corner to corner of the room, capturing the whole scene. My second favorite shot is just a head-on shot, which is the one that I'm doing right here. Basically we're looking into the room head-on and just kind of shows the room kind of different, and I really like that view because it looks really long, and especially if it's like a vertical oriented room like this kitchen is, it works out really well. Okay, so here we are in our last scene, which is basically the primary bathroom, and the shot looks really, really awesome. I love when the lines just line up perfectly, and so it's my favorite things about this. But you've probably noticed throughout me explaining this shoot that you hear 3 photos going off whenever I click the shutter. And basically what I'm doing is auto exposure bracketing. I almost forgot what it was, which is basically HDR. And let me explain why. Basically, the whole point of auto exposure bracketing, or taking multiple exposures, is to make sure you get the maximum dynamic range. So here, looking at the histogram, it's pretty balanced, and luckily it's a cloudy day, so there's not so much harsh sunlight coming in. But basically the whole point of that is to retain as much detail as possible, because this would probably be blown out versus this would probably be underexposed. So you take 3 different exposures, basically one exposing for your shadows, one exposing for your midtones, and then one for your highlights to get the maximum dynamic range out of your shot. So now let's do it. So on Canon, you're gonna go to Menu, number 2, exposure compensation, auto exposure bracketing setting, and I just do 2 stops. So there we go. Looks good. 2-second timer. And here's our 3 images. One that's really overexposed for the shadows, one that's underexposed for the highlights, and then one for the midtones, which is like your balanced image. So once you take your 3 images for all your scenes and you get back into editing, all you have to do is merge them into an HDR file. I use Lightroom, you can do this in Photoshop, but once you do that, it's really simple, and then you have a lot more dynamic range to maximize basically the best quality image. Well, that pretty much wraps up this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts. I'd love to hear some other real estate photography tips you might have, and subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you guys to be part of my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Time to sweep this house with some video.